back to that old trick to try and get through the world's complexities. Neil, let's talk about gender. Gender is probably the most divisive theme in the world right now. It's almost like you can't even talk about it without people losing their minds. And I guess at the center of it is this core belief, which many put forward, that there is a biological science towards sex, and then there is gender. And that is an identity issue which is separate to sex and biology. What is your view of this, and why has it got so toxic, and what is the way through this debate?
Yeah, so I think I have some insights there brought to you by how we end up classifying things in the universe. In the universe, very few things are discrete in what they are. There's, in almost all cases, a continuum between one kind of object and another. Now, it's hard to have conversations about continua, so you divide it up into as many categories as is sensible, and then you have a way to discuss what's going on in the universe with others. So here we have human beings, where, let's go back to the bio part of this, where you have the chromosomes, X, XX, Y. There's intersex, where one of the chromosomes is doubled up. No one is arguing that. Just give that to the biologists, and you can call that what sex? Is it male sex or female sex? I don't have a problem with that. What I do know is that in the real world, in a free country where, because I remembered some document that said the pursuit of happiness, it seems to me freedom, which is so heavily championed in the West, is accompanied by a pursuit of happiness. Okay. That's foundational to what I'm about to say. So, we all know growing up that in the classroom, every year, there were girls who were a little more tomboyish. In fact, tomboy, who came up with that word? They're really tom girls, right? A tomcat is a boy cat. A tom girl would be a sort of a boy girl, right? I don't know where tomboy came from, but there were tom girls. They didn't wear skirts. They wanted to play in the mud with the boys. We know they existed. There were boys that were slightly effeminate relative to the others. We know they existed. And so, but we had words for them. They were ridiculed, whatever. We live in a time now where people are emboldened to say, today I feel part female and part male. All right? So today, in fact, I will be neutral to you. I will be androgynous. But you know something? If you're trained in this, you got to be A or B, you got to be a boy, you got to be a girl. You know what you're doing? You're taking your inability of your human mind. By the way, this is true for all human minds, because we got to categorize. We always have to categorize, all right? It makes it easier to think about it, but in the end, it's just lazy, all right? So you say, boy or girl, are you a boy or a girl? And then someone is androgynous, and it makes you feel uncomfortable. But just because you feel uncomfortable, does that give you the right to come back to a person who's expressing their freedom of self?
It doesn't, but I think what I would say to this, here's where it gets more complicated. Take the issue of transgender athletes in women's sport, for example.
Okay, I got two more sentences and I'll jump right into that.
Okay.
I just want to set the table here.
Yeah.
I'm setting the table where, that if we allow gender to appear on a spectrum, gender expression to appear on a spectrum, as is apparently the case in the real world where people have the freedom to do so, then for you to put your limited capacity to think on a spectrum in a law that inhibits the freedom of others, that's not a free country. Okay, so now take it to the next step. Where do you want to take that?
Well, what I want to take it to is I don't disagree with that. I think in a free country, you should be allowed to identify whatever the hell you want to identify as. It's fine. I've got no problem with that.
Okay, so now where are you taking it?
So where I'm taking it specifically to say the issue of transgender athletes in women's sport, which I think has, in an attempt to provide fairness and equality for trans athletes, in women's sport, it doesn't apply the other way in men's sport. In women's sport, it's created a new inequality and unfairness where you have trans women born with superior, powerful male biological bodies who are beginning to beat women with comfortable ease in many sports, and yet they were very unsuccessful comparatively when they competed against other biological males as they were before they transitioned. So my question, I guess, there is, isn't that a clear case where science has to be the determining factor? Because if you remove that from this equation, then you end up with gender-neutral Olympics and women don't ever win an Olympic medal again.
Well, there are certain events that the men, like the uneven bars, you won't find men on the uneven bars. It doesn't work with male physiology. On that one. Okay.
But my point being, there are reasons why we divide the sexes in sport, is my point. And the moment you start allowing gender identity to overcome biology, I see there's a problem.
Okay. So, all that means is we are on a frontier that has not been previously breached, which is, what do you do in a sport where now there's an inherent advantage or disadvantage based on the rules that existed for that sport, whereas previously those advantages or disadvantages didn't exist. So this is not complicated. In high school, in college, and a little bit of graduate school, I wrestled. Okay, I was captain of my high school wrestling team and undefeated. I weighed in high school 190 pounds. Do I wrestle the 125 pounder? No, that would be unfair because I'm 65 pounds heavier, twice as strong, and maybe even faster. So they set up a rule. I only wrestle people my weight. Wrestling has 10 weight categories to make it an interesting contest. Okay, so let me just make this up now, just as a starter point. The transgenderism usually involves hormone readjustments, okay? Testosterone, estrogen. And so we can imagine a future of sports where you're not contesting men against women, you're contesting people in certain brackets of hormone levels. And why not?
Because it doesn't work.